Hello everyone. So today I will be continuing on my talk on contraception. So I will go ahead and share my screen. So firstly, today I will talk to you about contraception, as I said. So the church forbids sex outside of marriage. So its teachings about birth control should be understood in the context of husband and wife. So it should be in between the marriage, between the husband and wife. The Roman Catholic Church believes that using contraception is intrinsically evil in itself, regardless of the consequences. Catholics are only permitted to use natural methods of birth control, and this includes only natural family planning. But the church doesn't really condemn things like the pill or condoms in themselves. What they think is morally wrong is using these contraceptive methods with the intention of preventing conception or pregnancy. Using them for other purposes is fine. For example, let's say a woman uses the pill to regulate her periods, and this same woman will not be in a sexual relationship, then this will be considered not wrong. The church teaches that using artificial contraception is wrong because it is against the natural law. It breaks the natural connection between the procreative and the unitive purpose of sex. It also turns sex into a non-marital act when it only should be in the marriage. It gives human beings the power to decide when a new life should begin, and it is said that this power only belongs to God. It also leads to widespread immorality, and with the use of contraception, it damages the institution of marriage itself. Contraception also reduces the male respect that the male respect for women, as with the use of contraception, it sometimes makes them forget the reverence or respect that is due to a woman. It also gives human beings the idea that they can have complete power over the body. And lastly, contraception allows the implementation of eugenic programs. So these were some of the reasons that I mentioned why the church teaches that using artificial contraception methods is wrong. Some Catholic teachings on contraception. So in the year 1930, the modern attitude of the Catholic Church to contraception was laid down when Pope Pius issued a document called Casti Conibus, and this can be translated as the mean of chaste marriage. This document said that artificial birth control was a violation of the law of God and nature, and that those who used it committed a deed which is shameful and intrinsically vicious. And then in the year 1951, Pope Pius said that it was acceptable to use the rhythm method if a couple had a good reason to limit the size of their family. And if you do not know what the rhythm method is, it simply means, so the rhythm method is also known as the calendar method or the calendar rhythm method. And this is a form of natural family planning. And to use the rhythm method, the woman tracks her menstrual history to predict when she will be able to ovulate. So this will help determine when a woman is most likely to conceive a child. And in the year 1958, it was made legitimate for women to take birth control for medical reasons only. And then in the year 1968, Pope Paul issued a document called Humanae Vitae, where all artificial methods of birth control were banned. And also his position on birth control led to protests around the Catholic world and also in Roman Catholic hierarchies, where some countries they modified the policy. And now on to the next slide. And here we talk about Catholic arguments which are against contraception. So a lot of Roman Catholic moral reasoning is based on the natural law, and it is not just solely based on sexual ethics. Natural law is a way of describing the basic moral code that comes to mind when human beings think seriously about ethical issues. To Catholics, the natural law amounts to the way that God wants the universe to work. So don't get confused and think that there is a correlation or connection between the natural law and natural family planning, or between natural law and unnatural sexual practices. Natural law is a technical, theological, and philosophical doctrine. So Pope Pius objected to contraception as breaking the natural law. And some things that he mentioned in quotes were: no reason, however grave, may be put forward by which anything which is intrinsically against nature may become conformable with nature and morally good. Since therefore the conjugal act is designed primarily by the nature for the begetting of children, those who in exercising it deliberately frustrate its natural power and purposely sin against nature and commit a deed which is shameful and intrinsically vicious. So we can see that he was against the use of contraception, since the conjugal act is designed primarily for conceiving a child, and the use of contraception deliberately prevents this from happening. Pope Paul also emphasized that there is a inseparable connection which man on his own may not break. And this connection is between the unitive and the procreative purpose, which is inherent in the sexual act. So, yeah. Also, the sex should not be separated from the reproduction part. The Catholic Church teaches that there is an inseparable connection between sexual intercourse and conceiving children, and that it is wrong for human beings to use artificial methods to break this connection. So the church documents speak of the connection between the unitive significance and the procreative significance that the sexual intercourse in marriage should have. Natural law and artificial contraception. So the meaning of artificial contraception is not what it may seem for some persons, and it does not just solely refer to the method of birth control. So the basic idea is that everything in the world was created by God with a particular purpose in mind. Human beings follow now the natural law when their actions are in line with this natural end. God is said to have created the conjugal act for two purposes only, and these two purposes must be fulfilled if the act is to achieve God's intention. So the two purposes include procreation and uniting. So when a man and a woman have a sexual intercourse, the natural end, the one that God had in mind, is that a child should be conceived if the timing is right. And then in uniting, when a man and woman have sexual intercourse, they unify themselves as one flesh. If a couple has sex with artificial birth control methods, they do two wrong things. First, they artificially prevent the sexual act from achieving one of its natural ends, and they also deliberately choose to prevent the sexual act from achieving its natural end. So from the point of view from the church, this deliberate choice is morally worse than the use of artificial contraception. Now in the next slide, how contraception changes the marital act. So in Catholic teachings, it says that using artificial contraception changes the nature of the sexual act. So let's compare a couple who has sex when the wife is on the pill, and then a couple who have sex during the infertile period. So at first there may seem no difference between these two. As both couples are having sex with the intention of not getting pregnant, but theologians say that there is really a difference considered. So then the difference here would be that when a couple have sex during the infertile period, their intention is not to have a child. This doesn't actually change the act in itself at all. It's still the same act that can transmit and bring life forth, but because of the timing, it doesn't. But when a couple have sex with the use of birth control, any birth control methods, their intention is the same, but in this case, they have taken an action to prevent this conception or pregnancy from happening. So this will be a different act considering the first one that I just mentioned. So according to the church teaching, this second act is wrong, and it will be described as a non-marital act. So if a couple has sex with artificial birth control methods, yeah, then they are preventing its purpose, as I mentioned, which is procreation. And now onto the next slide. Birth control and the unity of a couple. So sexual intercourse using contraception is said not to satisfy the uniting purpose of sex. The physical or chemical barrier of contraception is said to create some sort of spiritual barrier between the partners. So to further clarify, the unifying function of sexual intercourse depends on each partner, giving themselves completely to each other. Two people who intend to prevent the conception of a child are holding back a part of the gift contained in the sexual act. So they are not really giving themselves totally to their partner. Either they give everything except their fertility, or they only accept the other if their fertility has been prevented. Therefore, it cannot be said that they are giving themselves totally to each other, as I mentioned, as they are holding back their fertility. Therefore, they cannot truly become one flesh. And now I have a video prepared, and this video, it talks about in vitro fertilization and contraception. So I'll go ahead and play this video.
So what is up with A, the church is teaching on contraception, and B, the church is teaching on in vitro fertilization, because they're actually kind of two halves of the same coin. So I thought, why not? I'm not doing anything. I might as well tackle this relatively controversial and very difficult sometimes to understand topic. Now, let me give you a little background on myself. There was a time in my life when I just hated being Catholic, and I hated the church and was embarrassed about being Catholic. And it actually kind of all stems from this particular teaching. The church is teaching that sex must be open to life, that all sexual intercourse, all sexual actions must be oriented towards the procreation of children. And I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I remember asking a bunch of priests and doctors, meaning doctorate doctors, teaching professors, nuns, this kind of sense of why is that? And no one was able to give me, well, they might have been able to give me a good answer. I was not able to hear any answer at all. Most people just told me well, don't worry about it. The church is way behind the times. And hopefully the church will catch up at some point. Thankfully, thanks be to God, the thing that brought me back to the church was someone speaking directly into this. Now, I won't be able to speak directly into this the way he was able to speak directly into this because it was a lot of years ago and I don't remember what he said. But here's my best attempt. Now, as I begin this attempt, again, clarification is if you're in a place where I just don't get it, that makes no sense. I was in that place as well, where I did not get it. It made no sense to me. Not that I had a horse in the race. I wasn't interested in using contraception. It was more but this teaching just, you might actually have a horse in the race. You might be married. You might be contracepting. You might be unable to conceive. And you're God, why does your church tell me that I can't do this thing in vitro fertilization? Just because your heart gets broken every month, you're just hoping and praying for a child. So again, as I said, I didn't have a horse in the race at the time. I just had the question. But you might have a horse in the race. You might have the question not only intellectually, you might have the question in your heart. And I just want to be as sensitive to that as I possibly can as I try to answer the question. Okay, so here's an attempt. Here's one possible explanation. There are other people who are smarter than me, who are holier than me, that can do a better job, but I'm the one with the camera. So here we go. I think for me, it all comes down to the nature of a thing. So how do you know what's the nature of a thing? Well, the nature of a thing is the what it isness of a thing, right? So the nature of a chair is this is the chair. The what it isness, it's a chair. The nature of the window is windowness, right? It's the what it isness. How do you discover though the nature of a thing? Is you have to look at the what is it forness of the thing, right? So what it isness is like, okay, that's the thing, that's the nature. How do you discover the nature? By looking at the what its forness of the thing. So a chair is to sit upon, right? So things that are to sit upon belong to the nature of chair, right? The nature of seat, whatever. The things you put things on belong to the nature of table. The what it is forness points to the what it isness. I can use something according to its nature. I can put books on that table. I can sit on this chair, right? I can also use a thing for my own purposes. Like, so I'm sure you've done this, where you walk up to a table and you've sat on the table. That's not what it's for, but you use it for your own purpose. Or I've set things on this chair. I didn't sit on it, but I set things on it. I used it for my own purposes. And there's sometimes we can do that, right? What it's for is to set things on, but I'm sitting on it and not doing any damage. What it's for is to sit upon. I'm setting things on it, not doing any damage. Okay, so there are some things that have the what it isness is determined by what its forness, but I can sometimes use it for another purpose and not violate the what it isness, right? So let's back up and look at sex, the sexual act. What is sex for? What's the nature of sex? Well, in order to understand the nature of sex, we have to find out what its forness of sex. So what is sex for? You'd realize it's for two things. It is for procreation and for the unity of the couple. Then I say the second part, the unity of the couple, because we recognize that even as people come together in the sexual embrace, the body releases certain chemicals, certain hormones that actually are like bonding chemicals. They're actually meant to increase affection and like make it stickier, right? So make couples have more and more affection for each other. So it's actually meant to increase the unity that they experience, but also obviously is oriented towards procreation. This is the one human act that ends in or can end in conception, right? So recognize that what it's forness indicates the nature of the thing, and what it's for, unity and procreation. So you might say like bonding and babies. And that's not me making something up. That's not me saying, well, that's the religious answer. It's just that's the objective answer. That's what sex is for. That's the nature of sex. Now, okay, go back to our example. So you can nature of a table, set things on, but I can also sit on it, right? So, Father, the nature of sex is babies and bonding. Could I use it for my own purposes? So in some ways, yes. For example, if you had a husband and wife and they're entering the sexual embrace, and maybe right now at this moment, they're entering the sexual embrace in this exact moment because they're like, no, she's ovulating. She's most fertile right now. So yes, while we have affection for each other and love for each other, the reason we're entering into this moment of the sexual embrace is more for babies than it is for the unity. Or another time where it's not that, it's the opposite, where here's a couple, husband and wife, love each other, and they're wanting to experience the unity of the sexual embrace, whereas they're not really trying to achieve pregnancy. Can you do that? Yes, of course you can. Now, the issue comes when a person directly works against the nature of the thing. So back to our chair and back to our table example. I can sit on the chair, I can sit on the table. But if I were to say this, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to use my chair for my own purposes, and I'm going to put some logs in here, I'm going to start splitting wood on the chair. Pretty quickly, I would violate the nature of chair. If I say, that's my table, it's my table, I can do whatever I want with it. I can set things on it. I can sit on it. I can also jack my car up on the table so I change my oil. I pretty quickly violate the nature of the table. Why? Because there's some things you can do for your own purposes. Disintegrate the very nature of the what it's forness of the table, of the chair, or of the sexual embrace. So what the church points out and reveals, again, it's not like making it up, but the church reveals is the contraception directly works against the very nature of the sexual embrace, which is conception. So it's contraception, right? It's not just entering the sexual embrace and not getting pregnant, it's working directly against that. And I can't work directly against conception without violating the very nature of what the sexual embrace is. Same thing is true for in vitro. In vitro separates the unitive action from the procreative action. I can't directly separate those things on purpose without violating the very nature of the sexual act, to violate the very nature of sex. This is like just powerful, maybe most powerful, I don't know, of all human actions in some ways. A couple can't do that without actually violating the very nature of the human person, I would say. So why is the church against this? Because the church wants you to be whole. Why does the church point out that, no, don't ever do that. Don't ever work against conception. Don't ever separate unity from procreation. Because the church wants you to be whole. The church wants you to be happy. The church wants you to have joy in your life. But you could say this, and this is kind of towards the end of the thing. You say, but Father, I can't have joy because I long for a child so badly that I'm willing to do anything for this child. How can I be whole if I can't conceive? I want to say I get that, but I get it as well as any celibate man can get it. You know, I get the desire for a child, but here's a deeper issue here too. Not only am I working against the very nature of the sexual embrace, here's what happens in vitro. A number of children are created before they're implanted, right? So the embryos are fertilized. We believe that life begins at conception, because it does. Again, this isn't like a religious thing. This is life begins at conception because it does. Sex is for procreation and unity because it is, right? Life begins at conception, and so is all these embryos that are frozen, these children, they're not allowed to grow to fruition. What do you do with all these children who have been created, who are now in a freezer? Those are human beings. And this is one of the things that it can lead to. You know, so many people in our world, they see children as liabilities, broken by being infertile, by that cross of infertility. Sometimes we can begin to see children as commodities. And again, I'm not trying to place any judgment on anyone's heart at all. But recognize, it said, these people over here, they think children are a liability. I want a child. But the issue is, do I want a child enough to make that child a commodity? Because the gift of life, none of us deserve. No matter how good or how much good we do in this world, none of us deserve grace. None of us deserve life. And none of us deserve to be parents. If we really believe that children are a gift, not everyone gets the gift. Not everyone gets the gift of their own biological child. I don't have the gift of my own biological child. And you chose that, Father? I'm like, yes, fine. God chose it. He chose it for me. I just said yes, is all. What I'm trying to say is the very nature of sex is what it's for, and is towards babies and bonding. To work against either of them is to work against what it is to be human. No matter how noble the cause would be. Now, say you have we did it in vitro, and now we have a child. Are you saying that they shouldn't be here? Are you saying that they're not really human? They're not made in God's image and likeness? I am absolutely not saying that. If you have been conceived through in vitro, or your children have been conceived through in vitro, you are a child of God. You're made in God's image and likeness. They are made in God's image and likeness. That's the truth. You're loved by God. Not an accident, not a mistake. I started this whole video by saying that for me, it was a very intellectual issue. And so I've been trying to address it like an intellectual issue, but I know that for so many people watching this is not an intellectual issue, this is a heart issue. My hope and my prayer is that this just began kind of opening the door to that there is a reason why the church is against contraception, and there's a reason why the church is against in vitro fertilization, because it doesn't let couples be whole. God wants you to be whole. Even if in the midst of that wholeness, there's a hole in your heart. God loves you very much. Promise Innocence presents my next Father Mike.
So this was the video. And in this video, Father Mike talks about in vitro fertilization and contraception. So some important things that were mentioned is that sex is only for procreation and the unity of the couple. And these two should not be like separated from each other. Also sex and not just sex, but introvertization does not bring, is like not a way to bring forth a new life. So this will just leave sex, which is a natural way to bring forward a new life. And it was also mentioned that contraception and contraception and in vitro fertilization violate the nature of not only sex, but it also violates the nature of the person and life itself. So this was some of the important things that was mentioned in the video. And I hope it clarified some of the questions that you might have had. So this was the end of my presentation that I had on contraception. So thank you for watching this video.